Let's start by introducing our first speaker, Bruce Marcus. He's first because he's from Boston, Massachusetts, and it's after 10 o'clock at night there. So he wanted to go first and be fresh. Bruce regales audiences with his fresh as mint, original, true life, and made up stories, poems, and songs. Recipient of Northeast Storytelling's 2021 Brother Blue and Ruth Hill Award, Bruce has been featured in many performing arts festivals and on PBS's World Channel's Stories from the Stage. Bruce serves as coordinator and frequent host for the storytelling series started in 1992, wow, 30 years, by Brother Blue and his wife, Ruth Edmonds Hill. It's now called The Story Space, and we'll learn more about that at the end. Bruce's tall offering this evening is an original story entitled The Whole Truth. That's H-O-L-E, truth. The Whole Truth. Bruce Marcus.
Well, thank you, Tina, and good evening, everybody. Greetings from the East Coast, where it's a little colder here than it is there. It is winter time here. And I am delighted to be here with you tonight. And for my story, I want to invite you to my town, Boston, Massachusetts, back in the 1990s, and introduce you to my friend, Henry. Now, Henry and I have been friends since we were kids. Henry, I would describe as just fairly typical guy. And yet, the most extraordinary things always seem to be happening to Henry, and oftentimes to me whenever he's involved. Well, one evening back in the 1990s, the late 1990s, my telephone rang. It was Henry. "Dude in distress," he said. I drove into a pothole. I looked at my half-cooked dinner and sighed. "Okay," I said, "where are you?" "Comm Ave, Boston, right in front of Wilderness House." "All right," I said, "I'll get there as quickly as I can." Henry said, "You'd better bring a crane." I laughed, assuming, of course, that he was joking. Well, it took me about a half an hour to claw my way through rush hour traffic, and as I approached Wilderness House, I thought maybe Henry had been towed already because I didn't see his old beat-up green Plymouth anywhere. And then I saw why. Just in time, I jammed on the brakes, screeching to a halt, and heard the person behind me do the same thing, and the person behind that, and the next person, and the next, all the way back toward the Brighton Avenue split. Amid a chorus of blaring horns, I hopped out of my car, trotted forward, and stopped. There, before me, was the mother of all potholes. It was as longer than a car is long and wider than a car is wide, and I stood at the very edge, looking 10 feet straight down onto the roof of a checkered cab. Henry's car, it turned out, was the sixth car underneath that, and his car wasn't even on the bottom. I called down, "Any casualties?" Well, miraculously, no one had received anything worse than a scratch or two. Altogether, I soon learned there were 10 cars down in that pothole, stacked with surprising neatness, and 15 people, 10 drivers, 4 passengers, and one dazed pedestrian who was sprawled out on the hood of the checkered cab who'd stumbled in moments before I arrived. Well, one of the people had been driving home. This woman was driving home in a blue Honda that was near the top of the stack with some pizzas for her family. Another fellow driving a red MG Midget had landed upside down and had a case of beer, fortunately in cans, that had scattered all over the floor of the pothole. Well, when the others found out that there was pizza and beer, this little sort of impromptu party had broken out. The party was in full swing by the time I arrived. Reassured that everybody was basically okay, I headed into Wilderness House to borrow some rock climbing gear, ropes, harness, carabiners, and such. A very short time later, I stepped out of the store with an armload of rock climbing equipment, and accompanying me was one of the employees of Wilderness House, this young rock climbing expert, a tall, thin guy with a ponytail and a scraggly beard. We rigged up this top rope system that we anchored to the bright yellow Denver boot that was clamped onto the front wheel of a black BMW that was parked next to the pothole. My apologies if any of you drive a Beamer. It just happens to be my favorite detail in the entire story. When everything was secure, we tossed the free end of the rope down into the twilight below. Well, by now, most of the beer was drunk, as were the people drinking it. Most of them weren't in any too good a shape to climb out of the pothole. But one by one, climb out they did, until finally Henry struggled, smiling, up to above street level, and the rescue mission was over. But not my story. As luck would have it, one of the people down there in the pothole was an attorney. And while she was waiting to be rescued, she drafted this proposal to the city of Boston offering all 10 cars as landfill, reasoning that they were all totaled beyond salvage or repair, the cars that is, not the motorists. There wasn't that much beer. She proposed that the city could leave the cars there and save the effort and expense of extricating them out of the hole, as well as the additional effort and expense of transporting materials there to fill the volume of space that the cars occupied. In return, nobody would bring suit to the city of Boston if, and only if, the city bought each and every one of those motorists a brand new vehicle. Well, everyone had enthusiastically signed that. And within days, the city of Boston agreed, the pothole was filled, the street was paved over again, and the deal was sealed. Well, Henry was overjoyed. His car had been running on its last legs. Did you ever see a beat-up, rusting green car with a mobile phone antenna on it prowling the streets of Boston in the 1990s? It was probably Henry's car. His one regret was that amid all the excitement and the beer and everything, after he talked to me, he laid his mobile phone down on the passenger seat and left without it. By now, it was entombed along with his car beneath about 18 feet of sand and gravel, asphalt, and 5 other cars, with no hope of ever getting it back. Well, about a week later, I got a funny idea. I decided to call Henry's phone, see if anybody answered. So I dialed his number and I waited, and it was ringing. And then someone picked up. But nobody said anything right away. There was this scuffling, scratching kind of sound. And then this shrill, kind of breathless voice came on. Hello? It turned out that I was talking to a sewer rat. That's who he said he was. And I don't know how I came to believe him, but in a very short time I did. Now, I was as flustered as any of you would have been. Yeah, I said, right. So, yeah. What do you say to a sewer rat? How are things down there, underneath the street down there? I mean, well, things down there, as it turned out, were great ever since the cars had arrived. Well, the cars were really cool to explore for the sewer rats. People had left all kinds of wonderful pizza crusts around down there, and they were having a very good time using Henry's mobile phone, calling relatives all over the country, including out there where most of you are in California. Turned out that Willard of movie fame was a distant cousin. Well, people had left cassette tapes. You remember cassette tapes? And tape decks. I particularly like the rat music, he said. Rat music, I said. That's right. He played me a sample. This pounding beat came on, accompanied by a male voice, an angry male voice that was speaking, not singing, about the hopelessness and horrors of his urban neighborhood where he lived. Oh, I said, you mean rap music? Oh, is that what it is? It's kind of dark down here, you know. It's hard to read. Well, after my little chat with the rat, I debated whether I should tell anybody about this conversation. I mean, you know, if I was having a cup of tea with you or a or a beer, and I just casually mentioned, oh, by the way, I had a telephone conversation with a sewer rat. I mean, how would you react, right? I knew my veracity, not to mention my sanity, would be put into question. I really wanted to mention it to Henry because I knew that in his not distant future, he was going to receive the surprise of a telephone bill with some hefty long distance charges. That was back in the days when long distance charges were billed separately. But finally, I decided I would just keep the whole thing to myself, better off that way. And in several days, I began to wonder if this conversation had ever actually happened. So I figured I'd make another phone call to my newfound subterranean rodent friend. The phone rang, was ringing, and I found that I was sweating a little bit, kind of holding my breath. Silly, I know. And then someone picked up. But it wasn't the same someone. Apparently, Henry's number had been reassigned in the interim since I last dialed it. I had now reached an office. As it turned out, a City of Boston office. And not just any office at that. Good afternoon, a cheerful woman's voice chimed. Pothole hotline. Well, when I was finally, no sooner did I extricate myself from that conversation and hang up the phone when it rang again. It was Henry calling from his new mobile phone. You're not going to believe this, he said. I drove into another pothole. Henry, I said, are you a AAA member? Nope. Well, I think it's about time you joined. Wouldn't do any good, he said. They don't have AAA here. What do you mean they don't have AAA? Who's they? Okay, he said. You remember last Wednesday when I drove to Kenmore Square to buy some Red Sox tickets? I drove into this pothole then. Wednesday, I said. That was half a week ago. That's right, he said. And I've been falling ever since. 3 days it took me. I was falling, and I finally just landed here. Henry, what are you talking? That's not possible. Landed where? Henry, where on earth are you? There was a silence for several moments over the phone, and then Henry drew a long, slow breath. He said, remember when you were a kid and you were at the beach and you were digging in the sand? How one of the grown-ups would say that if you dug far enough, you'd reach. Henry, you're not going to tell me. That's right, he said. I'm calling you from China. And that, my friends, is the whole truth. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bruce. That was just delightful. I don't think I've ever heard a tall tale with so many twists and turns and new refreshing areas that it came up into. Beautifully told. Thank you so much. So we'll bring you back later on to talk more about story space. But now let's talk about our second storyteller, Eric Hurt. In his 20s, Eric Hurt and a friend worked as professional storytellers up in the Pacific Northwest. They traveled all over. They called themselves Teller Two, a storytelling twosome. And then for over a decade, Eric told ghost stories at night in Old Town Sacramento. 5 years ago, he got back into storytelling, his first story being a tall tale. And since then, for fun, he started a podcast telling ghost stories, historical stories, treasure stories, love stories, tall tales, stories of all kinds from California's past. It is called Telling Simple, and it is still a work in progress. Eric's representing Foothill Storytelling Guild tonight, and his story title is Snake Whip Special, a tongue-tickling tall tale that Eric adapted from a little bit of history that took place on a forgotten road between the towns of Auburn and Forest Hill, California. Please welcome Eric Hurt with Snake Whip Special.
Thank you, Tina. Hello to everyone. So the way I remember it, it was either in a museum or in one of those 100-year-old hotels, but there was this picture on the wall, and right above the picture was this little copper plate, and the copper plate read Snake Whip Special. And the picture was of an old cowboy, and you could tell by his face that he had had a hard life. And there on his hip was a whip. I remember looking up at that whip, and it looked kind of like a snake all coiled around. And right below the picture was this story. And the story talked about this lonely, dusty, dirty road that stretched between Auburn and Forest Hill. And right in the middle, next to this road, was a place called Robber's Roost. It was a giant of a rock where you could see everything coming and going. And whenever a horse coach would travel by, these, there were these robbers, bandits, thieves that lived there, and they would jump out from behind their bushes, rocks, and trees, and they'd wave their weapons, and they'd stop the horse coach, and then they'd go about robbing every one of their coins, watches, rings, and such. And they'd even rob the reinsmen, the drivers of the horse coaches. Now, a lot of the horse coaches, or the reinsmen, they quit or they moved on to other roads. But there was one reinsman in particular that was said to be the best reinsman that road had ever had. In fact, they said the best in the world. He carried with him on his hip a special whip. And it was said that this whip could make horses run faster than they knew how. You see, if they were going along down the road and the reinsman, he sensed a little bit of danger, and one of the horses was running a little bit slower than it should, well, that reinsman would take out his snake whip and he would swing it around his head. It would stretch out longer and longer and longer. And then he would snap that whip and it would fly up all the way up right behind the ear of the horse. And then it would just give a little. And now I should tell you that whip was alive. And that little tongue tickle to the back of the horse's ear, well, it would make the horse way, as if it were to say, no way. And then it would pick itself up in its harness. And by doing so, it would pick the other horses up off the ground so their feet could barely, well, they didn't even touch. And then it would run 10 times as fast as it could all the way back to town, carrying those horses and the horse coach all the way there. Now, this was a special whip. It was a rattlesnake. And as long as the reinsman held on to its tail, that rattlesnake would never bite him. It would remain loyal and true, and it would always remain at his side as long as the reinsman held on to the rattle part of that rattlesnake. And that reinsman got a lot of use out of that snake whip. Around Robber's Roost, say a robber were to pop out from behind a tree, the reinsman would swing his snake whip around and snap it, and that snake whip would fly all the way up to where the cheek was of that robber and just give a little. Well, of course, the robber, he'd go hightail it out of there. Or say a thief were to pop up from behind some bushes, well, the reinsman would swing his snake around and snap it, and that snake would fly all the way over and just kind of just give a little tongue tickle to the nose, and the thief, well, and he'd run through the woods as fast as, well, just fast enough to almost make the forest burn. And, well, so it's safe to say no robbers, bandits, thieves could ever stop that horse coach. That is until one day. The horse coach had just passed Robber's Roost, and there on the road, there were these 5 bandits, and they had their weapons raised, this sort of a gang of 5. And the horses did something they had never done before. The horses just stopped right where they were. And the reinsman, he swung a snake whip around, and he snapped it, and he snapped it, and he snapped it. Each time the whip got up and tickled the back of the horse's ears, but they wouldn't move. They just stood like their feet were stuck to the ground. And then they watched as that group of bandits, that gang of 5, they moved over to one side and they raised their weapons, hey, as if to say, and then they moved over to the other side of the group and they raised their weapons, just kind of a hey, as if to say, and then they moved towards the horses, and the horses, they took a step back, not sure what to do. And then the gang of 5, they pulled back and they raised their weapons one more time. And this kind of a dance went on and on. And now this gang of five, they weren't very tall. And, not to judge, I don't want to say they were kind of short, but, well, they were kind of small. And the reinsmen, well, this gang of five didn't seem to know quite what they were doing because, well, just the way that they were behaving. Well, the reinsman, he just decided that he had enough. So he climbed down from the horse coach and he walked over with his hand hovering above his snake whip. And well, of course, the gang of five, they just kind of looked at him and then hey. And the reinsman, he stepped back. Hey, okay, easy, fellas, easy. And then he backed away. And then it was at that point, the mother of all bandits stepped out of the bushes. I mean, she was twice the size of the bandits. And when I say mother, she was the mother of these bandits. She was all black and she had a white stripe that ran from her head all the way to her tail. And these bandits were her kids or kits, I think is what they call them. And anyway, she raised her weapon. It was huge. It was like a double barrel weapon. Well, the reinsman had enough. He took his snake whip and he swung it around and he got longer and longer and he snapped it. And that snake whip flew straight at that mother of all bandits. And as it was flying through the air, it stopped halfway. It did something it had never done before. And then it turned its head back at that reinsman as if to say, no way! Because it turns out that skunks eat rattlesnakes. I mean, who knew? I mean, really? Who knew? Well, that reinsman, he was so startled, he dropped the end of that snake and it dropped to the ground and then it kind of slithered over towards those skunks and it hissed and it hissed and there was a lot of hiss talk going on and more hiss talk and maybe some bird talk and then it slithered off into the bushes. And then those skunks, they're just bouncing around, just, oh boy. And they chased that rattlesnake off into the bushes and that snake whip was never seen again. Now, according to this story that was underneath this picture, it talked about how tough that snake whip was. And well, I like to think that snake whip got away. But turns out the reinsman never needed that snake whip ever again because word soon traveled up and down that lonely, dusty road about what had happened with this holdup. And soon all the robbers, bandits, and thieves, they hightailed it out of Robber's Roost, leaving it to the gang of five and their mother, because they all figured that if any gang could hold up a stage or a horse coach for 2 full hours and have the law scared to chase after them, well, they were not to be messed with. And as for the reinsman, never again did he have his horse coach stopped. You see, he knew a secret. He knew when to make his horses run faster, when to make them run slower, because whenever there was trouble up ahead, he could always smell it coming.
Oh, what a great final line. Eric, that was absolutely delightful. Tell me, what caused you to think about writing that wonderful story?
Well, so I came across this little incident with some skunks, and I just thought that it would be just kind of I was looking for a fun, creative way to retell it. Would be interesting, and I thought a tall tale would lend itself to it perfectly. So
Wonderful. That's just great. Now, you're from Foothill Storytelling, and I know you want to talk about the Auburn Festival and all that. So I'll get back to you at the end of the show, and you can.
Sounds good.
Yeah, and we want to hear about your podcast too. That sounds very exciting. Let's bring up our third storyteller. She's new to the genre storytelling, Zach, because she's from Ellensburg, Washington. Marty Fallshore. A couple of us thought it was Marte or Moth, but it's Marty Fallshore. Now, Marty says she's relatively new to storytelling as a performer, but she was a professor at Central Washington University, teaching statistics and research methods in the psychology department. And she used storytelling to illustrate points while teaching. She says, I am a bit of a nerd, but she's always wanted to tell as a performer, especially folk tales and tall tales. that is lying. Marta's pretty well told the truth her entire life. So in an effort to get better at lying, she's actually started a small practice group, the Little Liars group on Zoom. It's wide open to anybody, and she'll talk about that at the end of the show. And Marta's also a board member of the Seattle Storytelling Guild. The story she's telling tonight is an original story called Adventures in Shake Rag, Georgia. It's about what happens when a little girl falls down a well with only her older sister to help her out. Marty Fallshore.
Thank you. Thanks, y'all, for having me. When I was about 10 years old, my sister and I lived in Shake Rag, Georgia with my mama. It's a small town about an hour north of Atlanta. And I loved living there because it was this nice little wood house built at the turn of the earlier century. And it had, we were on a couple of acres, and we had a horse and milk cow and a goat cow and dogs and cats and all kinds of stuff like that. And the house had a well on the front porch so that when the electricity went off and the pump wasn't working, we could still get water. But the best thing was, in the middle of the hallway, there was the original well for the house that was just flush with the floor there, but it had been poisoned or something at some point. So the people had put a piece of plywood over it and a little rug and just left it there. Well, when we moved in there, me and my sister Sissy, her name's actually Melissa, but we call her Sissy. Me and Sissy would get on that piece of plywood, move the rug, of course, we'd get on that piece of plywood, and we'd be bouncing and bouncing and bouncing until our mama caught us. It was kind of like a trampoline, but our mama caught us and told us not to do that anymore. If she ever caught us again, we'd get a whooping. But of course, we would sneak in and do it sometimes, but she was afraid, of course, that we'd just fall down in the well. So one day, she left me in charge of Sissy while she went to Atlanta to do some shopping. And of course, Sissy immediately uncovered that well and was bouncing on it while I was off doing something else in the living room. And she's bouncing and bouncing, and all of a sudden I hear this crack. And I go running in, and Sissy, of course, had fallen into the well. Sissy, you okay? Yeah, I'm okay, but get me out of here. It's cold and I'm wet. I can't even see you. How far down are you? I don't know, but it's cold and it's wet. Get me out of here. So I thought about it, and I thought, okay, I guess we got a rope. I'll try a rope. So I went and I got our rope and I put it down there. Can you reach the rope? No, I can't reach it. Could you jump and try? I can't reach it. So I just let go of the rope and let it go. And then I thought, well, we got a ladder. So I went and I got the ladder. I was like, Sissy, you move way off against the wall. I'm going to drop this ladder. So I dropped the ladder. You okay? Yeah, I'm okay, but I can't get up the ladder. The ladder's too short. Get me out of here. It's so cold. Are you having to swim, Sissy? No, I ain't swimming. It's just up to my chest. But it's cold. Get me out of here. I'm starting to panic. And she was really starting to panic. She kept screaming, I'm cold. Get me out. I'm cold. Get me out. And I couldn't think because she was so upset. So I started singing her favorite song. There was an old lady who swallowed a fly. I don't know why she swallowed that fly. Perhaps she'll die. Sissy, sing along. It'll make you feel better. There was an old lady who swallowed a spider that wriggled and jiggled and tickled inside her. She swallowed the spider to catch the fly. I don't know why she swallowed that fly. Perhaps she'll die. There was an old lady who swallowed a bird. How absurd. She swallowed a bird. She swallowed the bird to catch the spider that wriggled and jiggled and tickled inside her. She swallowed the spider to catch the fly. I don't know why she swallowed a fly. Perhaps she'll die. There was an old lady who swallowed a cat. I know what we'll do, sissy. She swallowed the cat to catch the bird. She swallowed the bird to catch the spider. Swallowed the spider to catch the fly. Swallowed the fly. Don't know why. So she swallowed the cat, and then she swallowed the dog to catch the cat, and the goat to catch the dog, and the cow to catch the goat, and the horse to catch the cow. She died, of course, but that don't matter for this. I'll go get all our critters, and we'll start putting them down in the hole, and we'll get you out that way. Okay, just hurry. It's cold and I'm wet. So I went and I got the horse and the cow and brought them in the house, and the goat. The dog was already there. And I tried to pull that horse over to that hole, and then I realized, well, the hole's too small. So I had to cut up a bunch of the boards and dig a little bit to make it big enough for the horse to get in. And then I pulled that horse and it wouldn't go, and I pushed it and it wouldn't go. I was like, I just don't know what to do. So I remembered if you blindfold a horse, it'll do whatever you want it to do. So I blindfolded the horse and I pulled it over, and it went right down in the hole. How's that, sissy? You okay? Yeah, I'm okay, but it's way too short. So I did the same thing with the cow. I blindfolded the cow and I pulled it in. And it landed right on top of the horse. The horse wasn't happy, but it was there. Is that tall enough? No, it ain't tall enough yet. So I got the goat, put the goat on top. That was easier. How's that? Try the dog. So I went and I got the dog, and he was not happy to be put in there, but he went in. It's a pretty obedient little dog. And can you do it now? And she was kind of climbing up, and she got up on the dog, and I reached down and I pulled her out of there. And thank goodness we didn't need to get the cat or the chicken, because I don't think they would have put up with any of that stuff. So I pulled her out, and we're standing there. We're both filthy. She's soaking wet. And we realized there's a bunch of critters down in the well, and Mama's going to be really upset if she comes home and sees all these critters down in the well. And we're like, how are we going to get them out of there? And I thought, I know, we'll get the tractor and some straps, and we'll pull them out one at a time. So we got the tractor and some straps. And I told Sissy she had to go down to put the straps on. And she's like, I ain't going down there again. Yes, you are. You're going down there because you were down there in the first place, and I'm older and you're going down. So she went down. She put the strap on the goat. That was easy to pull the goat out. Put the strap on the dog first, then the goat. And they both just shot out of the house, of course. And then we got the cow. It was a bit more difficult. Took a couple of straps and some good pulls by the tractor, but we got the cow out, who just shot out of the door too. And then finally it's the horse, and Sissy got on the horse and rode it up out of the whale. And the horse just took off with Sissy out the door and down the path. But she's a good rider, so she got off okay and came back in the house. And we are both just filthy, and she's soaking wet, of course. And we got to get the tractor back and fix the floor and get another piece of plywood. And we did all that and got ourselves all cleaned up just as Mama's coming up the driveway, and we're sitting on the couch, just pretty as a picture. And Sissy turns around and looks at me, and she says, Deborah Sue, that's my name, I'm Deborah Sue. She says, Deborah Sue, next time I fall in a whale, let's use the tractor first. Thank you.
Oh, how delightful, Marty. That's just wonderful. Everything about it, from the name of the town. Is there really a Shake Rag, Georgia?
It really is a shake rag.
And your accent is absolutely authentically convincing. Did you happen to grow up anywhere near Shake Rag?
I was born and raised in the South, and now I'm not going to be able to talk different for a while.
That is absolutely fantastic. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
very, very much.
Thanks.
So we'll have you come back soon and talk about the Little Liars Club, because that's
Okay.
a lot of fun. Wow.
Thanks.
Our fourth next storyteller is Dave Tarvin. Dave is a retired public servant, and he became interested in storytelling 5 years ago. He belongs to the Sacramento Storytelling Guild and tells mainly original historic fiction tales, as well as tall tales. Before COVID, Dave was working part-time, telling stories to seniors in skilled nursing facilities, retirement homes, memory care facilities, etc. He focused on doing creative storytelling with participants as part of his program. He's currently working on a series of stories for and about senior citizens. It sounds cool. Tonight's story, Kerfuffle, is a good example of that, as it is set in a seniors-only mobile home park. Kerfuffle is an original fiction story. Please welcome Dave Tarvin.
Well, thank you for that nice introduction. My name is Dave, and I'm retired. I live in a mobile home park. I've been actually retired for several years, and I love living here. Everything is quiet here. Life is slow. And my neighbors keep to themselves. You hardly ever see them. There's no crime. And it's just quiet and relaxing. The only excitement that I actually ever have is that every night, right about dusk, a little family of raccoons comes into the park through a drainage culvert, and it comes up and goes up into the hills to forage through the mobile home park. Now, the mobile home park is built on the side of a big hill, and I live at the very bottom. And like I said, it's quiet, and it had always been quiet until about 3 months ago. 3 months ago, I got this new neighbor right across the street from me. She moved in, and I'm not even sure she's old enough to be here. She doesn't look 55 to me, and she comes home every day after work, blasting in with her big old pickup with the windows rolled down and the music blasting. And then she gets out and she slams the door and she goes dancing and singing up into her place. And, but hey, people are what people are, and just is what it is. So I didn't let that bother me. And, but then one day, I just happened to be standing by the window, and she was walking by to go out to the mailbox, and she walked right by my garden. Now I have a garden, a flower garden right in front of my place. It's my pride and joy. And as she walked by, she started picking petals off my flowers, and she started eating them. I didn't know what to think of that. And she kept doing it day after day after day. But I thought, people are people, just is what it is. I just let it go. Well, a couple of weeks went by, and I went out and I noticed her cat digging in my garden around some of my prized flowers. And that was just too much. I'd had it. So the next day I went and I knocked on her door and I started to complain. I told her, you got to do something about this cat. I'm not going to tolerate this. And she denied even having a cat. Well, we started to kind of go back and forth with that. And next thing you know, some big burly guy comes out from behind her, or her boyfriend, and he starts to get kind of huffy with me. And I just said, whoa, no arguments here. So I left and I thought, well, I'll complain to the manager. So I went to the manager, and the manager did what all managers tend to do when you complain. They do nothing. So then I started to kind of fume and fuss, and I thought, well, what am I going to do? And then it hit me, you know what? I am going to teach her a lesson. And as I thought about it, I realized that, the trailer park is filled with all these feral cats. And, if you feed a cat, it will always come back. So I thought, I'm going to go out there in the middle of the night. I'm going to leave a bunch of cat food out right on her doorstep, and all those cats will come out. And so I went down to the store and I bought a bunch of those little cat food pouches, on sale. And about another week went by. I woke up in the middle of the night and I thought, this is the night. And so I went out and I took those pouches. I squeezed one out right in the middle of the little porch in front of her door. And then I went to go grab another pouch. And then out of the darkness, all of a sudden, quick as lightning, bang! A cat snatched that pouch of cat food and took off running with it. Well, the dog started chasing the cat and I started chasing the dog. And we got right down to this meridian, which is right up the street. Now there's this median rather, and it goes straight up the hill. And it's about 8 feet wide and it's filled with trees and bushes and all kinds of shrubbery. And there's this big tree right at the base. And the dog's got the cat tree there, it's barking. And so I got up there and I'm shining my flashlight. It was the cutest thing. This little cat with these big eyes. He got the food pouch in his paw. And I'm looking at it, and all of a sudden I realized, I thought, that cat is wearing a mask. And I thought, cats don't wear masks. And that's when I heard it. I heard this low, guttural growl. And I turned behind me and looked, and there was the Papa Raccoon just baring his teeth at me, growling. I looked down at the dog looked up at me, and we both ran into that median, and we started crisscrossing like that all the way up the hill, hoping to God that we were going to outrun that raccoon. We both popped out at the top of the hill and stood there for a minute. And sure enough, that raccoon, he popped out too. Well, we just took off running. And that raccoon chased me all through the trailer park. And as he would get close to me, and he would start swiping at me like that. And pretty soon we went around a corner, and that dog actually jumped up onto me. So then I had the dog in this arm, and I had some of that cat food in this hand. And that raccoon swiped at me and hit my shoe and actually tore my shoe off. So then I'm running, limping, carrying the cat food and the dog and running down the hill. And I thought, I got to get to the house. I got to get to my house. And so I ran down that hill with the dog and the cat food. And as I got down towards the bottom of the hill, pretty close to my house, all of a sudden the neighbor's door flies open. The big burly boyfriend comes barreling out, and he starts screaming and yelling at me. I didn't know what to do or what to say. So as I ran by, I just tossed all that cat food at him, and I ran straight into my house, and I shut the door, turned the deadbolt, and I turned off all the lights, hoping that would be the end of it. But then I heard all this yelling. I could hear him yelling, and I could hear all these cats meowing and screeching. And then I could hear the neighbor lady, and she was yelling something at her boyfriend. And then I heard a whoop, whoop, whoop. We all know that sound. And so I went to the window and I peeked through the little blinder things there, and I could see the lights flipping, and there were the cops. The boyfriend was up on the roof of the house. There was cats everywhere. The girlfriend was down on the ground yelling up at him. And then lights again, and there comes the fire truck. Well, it took them a while, but pretty soon, all those cats, they kind of disappeared. Boyfriend eventually came down, screaming, yelling, cussing something about cats. everybody goes home, and so then I thought, I'd just go to bed. And so I went over to my bed and I got underneath those covers. I put in some earplugs. I got my CPAP machine, put on my little mask, and I started to drift off into the night. And as I did, I thought, Shakespeare was right. All's well that ends well. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. What a kerfuffle. Perfect title for a story. And I think we've kind of got a theme going here, haven't we? We started out with Bruce's sewer rats, and then we went on to Eric's skunks, and Marta threw in a horse, a cow, a goat, and a dog, and Dave's got his raccoons and feral cats. Oh, I mean, can we bear any more? We've got 3 more tales. Let's bring up our 5th teller, Lance McVeigh. Lance was born and raised in Ben Lomond, California, in the Santa Cruz Mountains. He's been writing and sharing stories for 30 years. His stories are all original tales, written and told in verse. He's a member of Hayward Storytellers and Listeners, and tonight he's representing the Contra Costa Tale Spinners. Lance has published 1 book, Lighthouse Tales, and will be releasing a 2nd book this fall. We can find out more about that later. The stories Lance is going to tell, he'll tell 2 shorter tall tales. The first one is an ode to Mangus McGreen, and the second one is Mouse in the House. Please welcome Lance McVeigh.
Thank you. I'm actually going to flip those. Since we've got the theme going, I'm going to flip those and do Mouse in the House first because it just seems appropriate. So, so all of my stories are in verse. And this one's called Mouse in the House. I'm so glad that this has been set up so well by everybody else. This is fantastic. So, Mouse in the House. So my story is that not long ago, a man came to my house. And he said if I gave him shelter, he would give to me a mouse. Well, so I did, and so he did, and so it was that there I sat, with cup of coffee firm in hand, the morning paper, and a small gray rat. Well, rat or mouse, I could not say, but a rodent, all the same, was sitting on my countertop and seemingly quite tame. So a biscuit I did give to it, and it did what rodents do, and when it quickly finished it, it clearly wanted 2. Well, first 2, then 4, then 6, then 10, then coffee, cheese, and bread. Its hunger was insatiable. It should have been quite dead. But then it fell upon its back, its belly quite distended. And I was sure this rodent's life, now bloated, here had ended. But slowly, oh so slowly, it rolled its fatted form over to my fruit bowl. And here I said, no more. No, I said with a finger wag, this gluttony must stop. So I placed it in a shoebox and poked some holes on top. Then suit and tie and shoes and brief, I mustered myself on to train and bus to get to work. But the whole day I was gone, I wondered of that little mouse and the man I had assisted, and wondered how it came to be to me the mouse he gifted. But work is work, and work comes first, and so my day was spent. I tidied up my office, and home from work I went. But at my door, to my surprise, an officer stood firm, and several more inside my home, and soon I quickly learned a call came from my home that day, a desperate plea for help that claimed that I denied them food and boxed them up myself. I chuckled to myself and said, this simply cannot be. The only thing I locked up here was a mouse. Come here and see. I walked the officer inside, and there the box was tipped. No sign of rat or mouse I saw. The officer then quipped, so let me get this straight, he said. You think this desperate plea was from a mouse or rat, you say? You need to come with me. For hours, I was asked to make the same firm declaration. And so, for my own safety, I was held for observation. For For hours, I was told to make the same firm declaration, and so, for my own safety, I was held for observation. Now, I am not a man who lies. The truth is my North Star. And truth, it did not seem to me, would get me very far. So finally, after 3 long days of drugs and therapy, and admitting there was no mouse, they finally set me free. Arriving at my doorstep, I carefully unlocked the door and took a step inside, to horror and in shock. For there inside the home I loved, in every nook and crook, were mice of every shape and size, and everywhere I looked, in baskets, bowls, and cupboards, in cushions, couch, and chairs, my closets, clothes, and underwear, my refrigerator bare, my plants were eaten down to nubs, my cat was missing too, my plants were eaten too, my car was filled, my bed sheets, my fireplace, and flew. I grabbed a broom and held it tight, and fought with all my might. I fought with force and fury, and battled them all night. At dawn, the house was quiet. The vermin had been beaten. I was pale, scratched, and torn. I hadn't slept or eaten. Bruised and battered, worn and torn, I waddled to the kitchen and found just one unbroken cup. I quickly put a drink in. I gazed upon my worldly things piled in a heap. At some point, I can't tell you when, I drifted off to sleep. And then I woke quite suddenly to orange flames and smoke. I crawled across the floorboards, I sputtered, coughed, and choked. And when I found the door, I saw the mouse go underneath. But not before I'm sure I saw a wire in his teeth. All night, I watched the fire burn. The mouse was by my side. When asked what I thought caused it, you know I surely lied. And so, now homeless, I then wandered, aimless, lost, and lonely, and all I had left was this small mouse. But then I thought, if I could only find some soul to take it off my hands. And so I started on my search and focused on my plans. And when I finally found its home, it took me quite some time. I came and checked myself in here. These padded walls are fine. 3 meals a day, a place to sleep, it's really all I need. And best of all, there are no mice, and that is fine indeed. So my advice when offered mice or rats for trade or barter, remember me, and then you'll see it's really a non-starter. For once a mouse is in your house, no matter how you treat it, all it knows is how it grows with every bit you feed it.
Absolutely terrific.
Thank you. I hope that fit thematically. That was good.
That's just great. So there aren't any critters in your second story?
Well, not quite. No, I don't know how to describe this one. I'm just going to go with it because it's, I don't know if you call it a critter or not. I'll just leave it at that. So this is called an ode to Mangus McGreen. Bruce knows the origins of this one, which maybe I'll talk about later. All right, so an ode to Mangus McGreen. Now, Mangus McGreen, he was old and mean and lived in a shack on a hill. He was surly and sore and had fought in the war with gun notches, counting his kills. Now, alone, he resigned to live on a dime as remote as he possibly could. He ran an old still, thus drinking his fill and not eating as well as he should. But at night, he'd rejoice in his bitter life choice, and he'd sit in his rocker and puff on that old wooden pipe with tobacco so ripe, life didn't seem so rough. He'd stare at the stars, healing the scars that he'd carried for most of his life. The loss of a son at the end of a gun and the death of his beautiful wife. But then one night when the sky was bright and the starlight was vivid and clean, something occurred so strange and absurd, it changed old Mangus McGreen. He just sat to smoke when the sky awoke with a boom and a shudder and flash that lit up the sky, and he rubbed his eyes and was covered in dust and ash. Well, when the air had cleared, he dusted his beard and grabbed for his sawed-off gun, put 2 in the beast and pointed it east and stood, not looking to run. By an old dead tree where his family be in graves that he kept well attended was a smoldering pit, and by the size of it, something from above had descended. So he walked to the rim and looked within, and there in the smoke and sand, glowing hideous green through smoke and steam, was a stone the size of his hand. Well, using his boot, he gave it a scoot and kicked it right out of its nest, where it plunked on the ground, still green and round, and from where he had already guessed. You're an alien scout, and I have no doubt you picked the wrong place to land, because I'm meaner than spit, and I'll admit I'm dumb as a stump and damned. Then gun barrels blazed, and looking amazed, he saw it had hardly been scratched. Well, he was a bit surprised, so he narrowed his eyes. So it's gonna be like that. So he kicked that rock right into his shop, his boot striking hard and quick, where a forge in the night glowed orange and bright. He pumped up the bellows and spit. This is the end, my alien friend, and that forge roared mighty and hot. With tongs and gloved hands, he continued his plan, and he grabbed for that stone and got that thing in a heat. With the hammer, he beat that stone with a fury and force till it shattered and cracked, and with continued attacks, it turned to dust. And of course, he scattered that dust in the forge and thus was free from that alien stone. As the last gassy shreds of that thing were dead, he walked to his house alone. Well, while en route, he looked to his boot and noticed a smoldering hole. Where he kicked at the rock, it burned through to his sock, and his toe felt a tingle and cold. Well, you scored one there. I guess that's fair, he said as he readied for bed. As he turned out the light, the world seemed right, because that alien thing was dead. Well, he woke with the sun, and when he was done with breakfast of bacon and beans, he looked to his toe. It was swollen as though it'd been stung by a scorpion sting. Well, a few hours on, the swelling was gone, but then it turned horribly green. And later a pain shot to his brain, then something he'd never seen. That toe seemed alive. It would wriggle and writhe and sprouted a tentacled root. Damn that stone, he said with a groan. I shouldn't have used my boot. But I've lost an ear and 3 fingers, you hear, a kneecap, a rib, and my spleen. My spine's been fused and I am unamused. I'm vengeful, vindictive, and mean. So be ready, son, I'm not using my gun. Then he reached for his hatchet and gin. I've said my goodbyes, but I'm not ready to die. Then he hacked off his toe with a grin. Well, it fell on the floor, and then to his horror, it wriggled and started to crawl. And that little green root attached to his boot. Now I'm certain I've seen it all. Without further delay, he said, I'll say you're a worthy opponent, old rock. Then he burned that old boot with that toe in that root. And for safety, he threw in the sock. Now later, they say, he moved away to the city and found a new wife. And Mangus McGreen stopped being so mean and lived a quite regular life. He was happy and kind, and others would find he was gentle and generous too. They say he never swore, and he always wore steel-toed boots and shoes. So that's the whole story, be it ever so gory, but if truth to be told, every one of us owe a debt to McGreen for an ornery and mean. He defeated that alien fungus.
How do you think up these rhymes? They're just delightful. So much fun.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That was just great, Lance. All right. And let's see. We'll have you talking about your new book when we come back. Let's bring up our 6th storyteller, Heba Hamden. Don't know if she's got any animals in her story, but this is the first time Heba has told a story at a SAC event, so please be very welcoming to her. She's super excited. She is a longtime member of Toastmasters and a founding member of the Story Masters Club with me. Heba was born and raised in Lebanon, a beautiful Mediterranean country with a very old history from the Phoenician times. But Lebanon was torn by a civil war. Heba left when that war ended in 1991 and started her new life in North America, where she had a 20-year career in the airlines and telecommunications industry. In 2015, Heba moved with her husband from Los Angeles to Santa Barbara, where she started to work in TV show programming. 3 years later, Hiba initiated a local TV series called Wisdom of Our City. Check it out on Facebook and YouTube. Representing story masters with her original tall tale entitled It's a Jungle Out There. Please welcome Hiba Hamden.
It all started after we moved from Los Angeles to Santa Barbara. And after we moved into our new house in Santa Barbara, it all started after the pandemic era started. You see, it was a very simple and innocent thing that we wanted to do, my husband and I. Plant vegetables and herbs in our backyard. It's a tiny little backyard, but few vegetables, little herbs would be okay. We have already a few roses in there. Now, I'm the country girl, whereas my husband, he's just a city boy. So I'm the expert here. And we agreed to start our project the following weekend. And like any good old husband, my husband started the next early morning before I woke up, went to the backyard, sprinkled few of the mint seeds that he already got from the farmer's market, went further down in the backyard and planted a couple of squash plants and some parsley. When I woke up and he told me, honey, I already planted the seeds and plants we got. And I screamed, well, how could you do this? Where did you plant the mint, the seeds? Where did you have them? And he said, just around the roses. Well, how could you do this? Didn't you know that mint roots spread very fast and very far? And it will get around the roses. It will spoil the nice view of our backyard. These roots will go to our next door neighbors. A city boy. Well, a week later, we heard on the news that very strange mint plants started to sprout in San Luis Obispo and other cities 2 hours drive north of Santa Barbara. It went beyond our zip code. Our local reporter, John Palmenteri, interviewed some of the people up there, and they said they're very thankful for whomever planted this. Well, it's my city boy, my husband. Then parsley and squash started to appear. Now, you know parsley, you've seen parsley, you've eaten maybe parsley, but you've never seen my husband's parsley. Few days after he planted them, they became as tall as our roof. I would want to go to the back of the backyard, but I have to swim my way in the middle of these big parsley plants. It became like a big cornfield. We now have a parsley maze. It's a jungle out there. Now for the squash, we started to see it grow. Oh, nice little squash. And then the next day I said, honey, come see. This is getting really, really big. it's squishing its way around the big parsleys, but coming towards our house. The next day, it became bigger and bigger, like a big watermelon. And then the squash got so humongous. It pushed our house. It kept pushing, 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 until our house became bent. It became like the Tower of Pisa, except not in Italy. It's in our backyard. And this was our house becoming the local pizza tower. It's a jungle out there. It's the Amazon forest. You see those behind me? You think these are pancetta? Mm-mm. These are just weeds I picked from the ground. It's just tiny, tiny weeds on the ground of our background, of our backyard. Now, this became really something. And everything grew so big, so humongous, that it even impacted the ecosystem. You see, we don't have any pets except the birds outside and a skunk. This became, as the skunk became as a lion, big, big lion, a smelly lion. The hummingbird became as big as a swan, but a really colorful, beautiful, big swan. This went out of hand, and researchers started to show up at our door from the University of California in Santa Barbara here, from Berkeley, from Stanford, all over. They wanted to study our backyard. They took samples of our soil. They took samples of the plant we planted. They redid the same experiment in the lab, but the result was normal. They got normal plants in the lab. They called the US Department of Agriculture. They have a more advanced lab. And the USDA sent representative. They also took samples of the soil, the plants. They did research on all this, and all they got was just simple plants, as you know, as mint and parsley and squash would be. And then one day, the rep, a senior rep, I think, from the US Department of Agriculture came by and said, no, we can't leave it this way. I'm calling the CDC, the disease control, and you have to take a GTT test, you and your husband. Why should we take it? See, I mean, everybody now is taking PCR tests or whatever. Why the CDD? Why should we take a GTT test? What's a GTT test? No answer. Just went outside as if it's a big secret. And a few hours later, a representative from the CDC came by and he let us sit on the floor, lift our hands, and then he passed by a kind of scanner. He collected some data, checked them out, and a few minutes later, he looked at me, he looked at my husband, looked him straight in the eyes, and said, "Sir, you've tested positive." Tested positive? for GTT. What's a GTT? My husband tested positive for a big green thumb. It's a jungle out there. Madam, I'm sick.
What's a GTT? I kept wondering. Oh, goodness. And you managed even to get a few worms and creatures into your story too. Delightful. How original.
Thank you.
One last round of applause from everybody. Feel free to unmute yourself at this point and actually clap your hands.
Good job.
Yay! Great job.
Good job.
Great job, everybody.
Yeah.
Just breathtaking stories. This was, I don't know when I've had so much fun at a storytelling contest. My face hurts from laughing. Just great. And gosh, you know, Bruce, thank you for hanging out. I know it's midnight by now, or almost coming up to midnight, Boston time. So
Almost
we'll
tomorrow.
start with you then. We've only got a little bit of time, so I'll just ask one or two questions at the most. But do you want to tell us a little bit about the story space? So Bruce, yeah, tell us about it.
The Story Space meets every Tuesday evening from 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern time, which means it might be at the tail end of the workday for some of you folks on the left coast, but it would be 4 to 6 p.m. your time. We have been meeting every Tuesday night, or get ready for it. Coming up in February, we're going to hit our 30th anniversary.
Wow.
We might have missed a few weeks here and there, including at the beginning of the pandemic while we were transitioning from live to Zoom. But if you visit the website there, you can find out that we have a two-part evening. First part, open telling, 8-minute limit. Second part, a different featured storyteller every week. With Zoom, we can get people from all over the world. We have a couple of upcoming features right here tonight. Rupa is an upcoming feature. Ed Lewis is an upcoming feature. And we have a great time every Tuesday night. Love to have you join us. I wanted to mention one other thing also. We have a fantastic storytelling conference every spring here in the Northeast. It's run by the Northeast organization NEST, which is the acronym for Northeast Storytelling. It's called Sharing the Fire. It's a weekend-long extravaganza of keynote speeches, workshops, performances, fringe festival, parties late into the night. It's fantastic. Right now, it's still planning to go live. It's going to be in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, the last weekend in March. So visit the website for Northeast Storytelling, or NEST, and you can find out all about it. Again, it's called Sharing the Fire. Thanks.
Fantastic.
You know,
And just a word about your podcast, Bruce.
I don't have a
Oh, no,
podcast
sorry, that's right.
that I know of.
Wrong question. You aren't doing a podcast yet. Oh, right. But who knows? You might get inspired. Eric, I know you want to talk about the Auburn Winter Storytelling Fest.
So for all of you that are available this upcoming weekend at 12:30, starting on.
Having trouble hearing you.
Oh, my off mic. All right, I was just saying that this Saturday, the Auburn Storytelling Winter Festival is going on. Starts at 12:30. It's a free event. They've got open telling. Ed Lewis is going to be presenting at the beginning. Sorry. I've got an echo. All right. Well, anyway, just for any of you that are available this Saturday, it'd be great to have you attend. That's all.
Is it online or in Auburn?
Zoom online.
Okay.
Your Eventbrite.
And that's the registration information right there in chat.
Right.
And you're the one with the podcast. So you might
Yeah, I do one just for fun. So I try them out on the podcast and then I try them out here. Or I should do it the reverse way, try them out here and then try them on the podcast. But it's just a lot of fun.
That's just great. Thank you so much for coming tonight.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Martha, you got our Southern girl, right?
Marty.
Marty. Okay. All right. Tell us a little something about the Little Liars Club.
Okay, well, we've got this little liars group that I started after a liars workshop with Ingrid Nixon. And there's 5 of us who seem to regularly attend, but it's open to anybody. It's on Zoom. And my email just popped up, sort of. So if you want to join us, it's first and third Mondays, 6 o'clock Pacific time. And we just get together, and some people tell stories and some don't, and we give feedback. They help me. Dave and Ed are both part of the group, and Dave Tarvin, I should say. And they helped me craft the story I told tonight and other stories I've told, and we help them. And I also should mention Seattle Storytellers Guild is having Crone's Tales Friday night, which is for storytellers telling stories about maidens, and I forget the other 3, but maidens and maids and crones or something like that. And they're really fun storytelling event, concert. And
It does sound very intriguing.
more information about that as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I learned something from Martha. If you don't want to make your email accessible to those trolls who go around trying to recognize emails, put it in the way she did it. Where you said you had the beginning fallshorem@gmail.com and write it all out. That's so cool. Let's go on. Dave Tarvin. Want
Hey,
to tell us something about the Sacramento Storytelling Guild? What's coming up?
well, on the 4th Saturday of next month, we're going to have our monthly meeting. Actually, I'm going to host that. And the theme is From the Heart. So far we got people that are going to tell love stories, animal stories, that kind of stuff. So that's what's going on in the Sacramento thing. And we do a thing with local poets too. So we, in the program, in the middle of it, we inject a couple of poets who do some poetry. So
Very nice.
if you're hanging out, look us up. Sacramento
Great.
Storytellers Guild.
Sacramento Storytellers Guild. Thank you so much, and keep writing those great stories with those senior citizens. I love them. Super. Hey, Lance McVeigh. All right. Tell us about your book.
Yeah, so I have a second book of treacherous tales coming out called Lance McVeigh's Tales of Treachery and Terror. Yeah, and Mangus McGreen and Mouse in the House are both in there if you're interested in seeing those. It should be coming out, I think, early summer, somewhere in there. The printers are all backed up like everything else. But in my first book, Lighthouse Tales, is available on Amazon. You can find that there too. And then I think, Liz, maybe you could put in a link for Contra Costa Tail Spinners so people know when they meet, because I don't have that detail, but Liz has it. So maybe she could post it in the chat, because that's a great group. And if you have a chance to come in during Zoom, you know, can take everybody from all over. And it's a fantastic group. So yeah, and you can find more info at lighthousetales.com.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lance. And thank you for your stories. They were just lovely. Heba. So
Hey.
you're representing Story Masters. In fact, Heba and I founded Story Masters. Gosh, it's almost 11 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
Celebrated the 10th anniversary last year.
Although compared to 30-year organizations, I suppose we're just youths. Right. So do you want to tell them when Story Masters meets?
Yes, every third Sunday, second Sunday at 3 p.m. Pacific time, but we welcome anyone from any state, anywhere in the world, and you would be a guest. If you'd like to join us, it will be through our website, storymasters.com. And you have a lot of resources for storytelling there, by the way. And we advertise about these events, the SAC events there. And it's a fun group, just once a month. And it's an advanced storytelling platform, if you'd like, associated with Toastmasters, but not a typical Toastmasters meeting.
Thank you. Thanks. Between the critters and the ghosts, we had fun tonight. This was absolutely great.
Maybe you should, oh, sorry.
Go on, Marty.
Maybe you should start a ghost tellers group. I have one, just one.
You have a ghosty story, have you? Great. Well, let's have another round of applause for these fabulous tall tale tellers.
Super wonderful job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What a night. This was so much fun for me, and thank you all for coming. It's just absolutely great. Let me turn it over to the Storytelling Association of California's board chair, Sarah Armstrong. She'll wrap this meeting up. Thanks.
Thank you,
Can we
Tina.
get,
Thank
there
you.
it is, the spotlight.
Thank you, Tina. This was quite an evening. Just delightful. Thank you, tellers. Thank you, listeners. Just fabulous. And those of you staying up late to participate, thank you so much. Just wanted to tell you about a couple of things coming up. This Saturday is our second children's concert from 10 to 10:30. It's free. If you go to our website, the SAC website, you'll be able to sign up for it and get the Zoom link. And also, this series continues, the genre series continues. It's well over a year now. And next month, on February 16th, we'll be hosting Romantic Tales. So get your stories ready, get your swaps to sign you up, and we look forward to seeing you next month. Thank you, Tina. Thank you, Nicholas. Thank you, Ed. Thank you, everybody. Andrew, for supporting this ongoing today and in the past and in the future. And have a lovely evening, the rest of you. Thank you so much for coming. We'll look for you next month.
And thank you, SAC.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. What a great night.
Yes, it was.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. This was awesome.
Super.
Bye.
Okay.
Bye. It was really great having all the storytellers. You were all fantastic.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
Thanks,
Lots of
Ed.
fun.
Good to see your smiling face in the audience.
So let's stop the recording
Right.
and wish everyone a good night.
Night, everyone. Great stories.
Good night.
It was a wonderful time. Have a nice night.
See who turned that recording on. Maybe that person has to stop it
Go
too.
get some sleep, Bruce.